Hey there, deep divers. Ever feel like you're capable of so much more?
Hmm.
Like there's this untapped potential within you just waiting to be unleashed. You're
Yeah.
not alone. We're diving deep into Stephen Kotler's The Art of Impossible today, and let
Oh,
me tell you, this book is a gold mine of insights on unlocking that peak performance you're after.
what's so cool about Kotler's work is that he doesn't just talk about high achievers like they're these mythical beings.
Right.
He breaks down the science behind their accomplishments, showing us that it's not just about some predetermined talent. It's about understanding how our brains work
Yeah.
and then using that knowledge to train ourselves for peak
It's
performance.
like he's handing us the instruction manual we never knew we needed.
It is.
One of the things that really struck me early on was how Kotler uses action and adventure sports athletes,
Hmm.
especially back in the 90s, as prime examples.
Yeah.
Remember when snowboarding was just becoming a thing?
Yeah.
And those guys were pulling off tricks that seemed downright impossible.
Right. And Kotler emphasizes that these athletes were often coming from backgrounds where they didn't have access to fancy training facilities or big-name coaches,
Right.
yet they were consistently pushing the limits of what everyone thought was humanly possible. It's like that quote from the book, things that were impossible in the morning were possible by the evening.
Wow.
Literally. They were rewriting the rules right before our eyes.
Okay, that sends chills down my spine. It's like their sheer drive and determination somehow warped the fabric of reality.
Yeah.
But what fueled that incredible drive? Was it just adrenaline and a death wish?
Not quite. Kotler dives into the neurochemistry of motivation,
Okay.
and he introduces this idea of stacking your intrinsic motivators. This isn't about external rewards like money or fame,
Yeah.
but those internal drives. We all have things like curiosity, passion, the desire for mastery, and that feeling of autonomy you get when you're in the driver's seat of your own life.
Right.
He argues that when you consciously cultivate these internal drivers and align them with your goals, you tap into this incredible internal engine that can power you towards achieving the extraordinary.
Okay. I'm all about finding that internal engine and firing it up.
Right.
But how do we actually apply this stacking concept? Where do we even begin?
Well, Collar provides a really practical framework, and it
Right.
all starts with something we all have, curiosity. It's about tapping into those things that genuinely spark your interest, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant they might seem.
Hmm.
Remember that time you went down a rabbit hole researching like the history of shoelaces?
Uh-huh.
That's the kind of raw curiosity we're talking about.
Wait, you mean my late-night Wikipedia spirals have a purpose?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Kotler suggests creating a curiosity list.
Okay.
It's as simple as it sounds.
Okay.
Just jot down anything and everything that piques your interest. Don't overthink it. Just let your curiosity run wild.
I can already see how this could be eye-opening. It's like taking inventory of all those mental sparks that usually just fizzle out.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. As you're compiling this list, look for patterns for those areas where multiple curiosities intersect. That's where the real magic happens.
It's like that aha moment when you realize that several seemingly unrelated interests actually share a common thread.
Yeah,
Suddenly it clicks.
right.
They're not just random curiosities, they're clues pointing you toward a larger, more meaningful pursuit.
You got it. And that's where we transition from curiosity to passion to purpose. Kotler argues that having a purpose,
Okay.
that deep-seated drive to make an impact beyond ourselves,
Yeah.
is crucial for achieving the seemingly impossible.
He gives that great example about how our brains are hardwired to seek out resources, right?
Right.
Initially, it was all about survival, finding food, shelter,
Right.
and avoiding saber-toothed tigers. But eventually, this instinct evolved to encompass not just our own well-being, but the well-being of our family, our communities,
Yeah.
and even our species as a whole.
Right. It's like we're wired to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where the importance of setting those big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs, comes in.
Okay.
These are the goals that light you up inside, that align with your values
Mm-hmm.
and contribute to something larger than yourself.
And those big, audacious goals often lead to the most significant breakthroughs, both personally and for society as a whole.
Yes.
But let's be real for a second. Setting goals is one thing.
Yeah.
What about the sheer grit and determination required to actually achieve them?
Right.
I mean, there are days when just getting out of bed feels impossible, let alone tackling a BHA.
You're preaching to the choir here. Some days, my to-do list feels like an Everest of impossible tasks.
Right.
But you've hit on a crucial point. It's not just about setting those ambitious goals. It's about having the tenacity to see them through.
Yeah.
That's where grit comes in, and Kotler dives deep into the science behind it.
So it's more than just willpower, like those motivational posters telling us to just do it. I got a whole well of those, and let me tell you, they haven't magically transformed my life.
Right. Willpower alone can only get you so far.
Yeah.
Kotler argues that true grit is a trifecta of willpower, mindset,
Okay.
and yes, even passion.
Okay.
It's about having that unwavering belief in yourself and your ability to achieve your goals,
Right.
even when you face setbacks and challenges. And this is where that growth mindset we talked about earlier comes into play.
It all connects.
It does.
So instead of seeing challenges as insurmountable obstacles, we need to view them as opportunities for growth and learning.
Yes.
It's about rewiring our brains to see failure not as the opposite of success,
right.
but as a stepping stone on the path towards it.
Exactly. And that's not just some feel-good self-help jargon. There's actual neuroscience to back it up.
Wow.
A growth mindset can literally change the structure of your brain,
Really?
making it more adaptable and resilient in the face of challenges.
That's incredible. But knowing this intellectually and actually embodying it when you're in the trenches are two different things.
Sure.
Remember that time you were trying to learn how to play the guitar?
Yeah.
You were so determined at first, but then those bar chords nearly broke you.
Don't remind me. I almost gave up on music altogether.
Yeah.
That's exactly why Kotler emphasizes the importance of training our weaknesses.
Okay.
He says instead of shying away from the things we struggle with,
Yeah.
we need to actively identify and address them head on.
It's like that saying, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you.
Right.
But honestly, that's terrifying. How do we cultivate the resilience to face those challenges head on,
Yeah.
especially when things get tough?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes even thinking about my weaknesses sends me into a spiral of self-doubt.
I hear you. Facing those vulnerabilities is never easy. But Kotler offers some really practical techniques for building mental resilience.
Okay.
He talks about the power of reframing negativity, practicing gratitude,
Yeah.
and cultivating mindfulness.
I've heard a lot about mindfulness and gratitude lately. Are these really the keys to unlocking our inner superhero? Or are we just talking about trendy self-help buzzwords?
It might sound a bit cliche, but these practices have a real impact on our neurobiology.
Okay.
For example, practicing gratitude isn't just about counting your blessings.
Right.
It actually shifts your attention towards the positive,
Yeah.
which helps counteract our brain's natural tendency to focus on the negative.
Okay.
It's like mental weight training for positivity.
Okay, I can get behind some mental weight training. What about mindfulness? That always makes me think of people sitting cross-legged in silence.
Sure.
And I'm not sure I have the patience for that.
You don't need to become a meditation guru.
Okay.
Mindfulness is simply about observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment, creating a space between your emotions and your reactions.
Yeah.
It's about training your mind to be present, aware, and responsive, rather than getting swept away by every thought and emotion that arises.
So instead of being a slave to my emotional roller coaster, mindfulness
Yeah,
helps me become the one holding the controls.
exactly. And these mental resilience techniques become even more critical when we're talking about dealing with fear.
Because let's be real, pursuing those big audacious goals often means coming face to face with our deepest fears.
Right.
It's like that moment right before you hit the publish button on a blog post you've poured your heart and soul into.
Yeah.
Or the feeling of vulnerability you experience when you put yourself out there creatively.
You're spot on. And Kotler argues that fear isn't something to be avoided or conquered. Instead, he sees it as a natural and even essential part of pursuing those challenging goals.
Okay.
He even introduces the concept of a fear practice.
A fear practice.
Yeah.
Now that sounds intriguing and maybe a little terrifying.
I know, right? It sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But Kotler highlights the experience of extreme athlete Kristen Ulmer,
Okay.
who intentionally puts herself in situations that scare her as a way to build courage and expand her comfort zone.
Okay, so we're talking about facing your fears head on, just like Ulmer does when she's, say, skiing down a treacherous mountainside.
Right.
But how can we apply that same principle to, our everyday lives?
Right.
I'm not sure my anxiety needs any more encouragement.
Well, the key here is to approach fear with curiosity rather than resistance. Instead of asking, what if I fail? Ask yourself, what if I succeed?
Okay.
Remember, fear often disguises itself as a reason to stay stuck.
Yeah.
But it can also be a powerful motivator, pushing us to step outside our comfort zones and achieve things we never thought possible.
It's like that quote, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear.
Right.
But facing those fears, even in small doses, can feel overwhelming.
How do we even begin to develop a fear practice without sending ourselves into a full-blown panic attack?
Start small.
Okay.
Instead of trying to conquer your biggest fear all at once,
Yeah.
identify baby steps you can take to move towards it.
Okay.
Maybe it's speaking up more in meetings,
Right.
sharing your creative work online,
Yeah.
or simply saying yes to new experiences that make you slightly uncomfortable. So it's like building up a tolerance for discomfort, just like you would with physical exercise.
Exactly. And as your tolerance for discomfort grows, so does your capacity for taking on bigger challenges and achieving those seemingly impossible goals.
That makes sense. But let's shift gears a bit. We talked about the importance of motivation, grit, and facing our fears.
Right.
But what about the actual learning and skill building required to achieve the impossible?
Yeah.
I mean, even with all the motivation in the world, you can't just magically become a brain surgeon overnight, right?
You're absolutely right. Motivation and grit are essential,
Yeah.
but they're only part of the equation.
Right.
That's where effective learning and skill development come in. And Kotler offers a fascinating 5-step process for mastering any subject.
5 steps. Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the blueprint.
He starts by emphasizing the importance of a growth mindset,
Yep.
which we've already discussed.
Right.
But then he introduces the concept of developing a truth filter.
A truth filter. That sounds intriguing and necessary, especially in today's world of information overload.
Exactly. It's about becoming a discerning consumer of information,
Okay.
learning how to critically evaluate everything you read, see, and hear.
Right.
We can't just blindly accept everything we encounter.
Right.
We need to develop our own internal BS detector.
So it's about sifting through the noise and identifying the signal, those nuggets of wisdom and insight that are actually worth our time and attention.
Precisely. And once you've developed that truth filter, Kotler argues that books are still the best source for deep learning.
I love the smell of a good book.
Mm-hmm.
But in this age of instant information and bite-sized content, are books really still relevant?
Absolutely. Think about it. A book often represents years, sometimes even decades, of an author's research thinking
Right.
and experience all distilled into a single compact package.
Yeah.
It's like getting an all-access pass to the author's brain.
Okay, that's a pretty compelling argument for dusting off my library card. But let's be real. Diving into a new subject,
Yeah.
especially one that seems daunting or complex, can feel overwhelming.
Sure.
Where do you even begin?
Well, Kotler has this brilliant strategy he calls the 5 books of stupid.
The 5 books of stupid. Okay, now I know you're speaking my language. Tell me more.
It's based on the idea that when we first start learning something new,
Yeah.
we're going to feel stupid. We're going to encounter unfamiliar concepts, jargon,
Right.
and ideas that make our heads spin.
Yeah.
But instead of letting that feeling of inadequacy discourage us, Kotler encourages us to embrace it.
So it's like giving ourselves permission to be beginners, to stumble and fumble our way through the initial stages of learning
Yeah,
without feeling like we need to have all the answers.
exactly. He suggests picking 5 books on the subject you want to learn about
Oh,
and reading them not with the goal of becoming an expert,
right.
but simply to familiarize yourself with the basic concepts, terminology, and overall landscape.
So it's about laying the foundation, building a framework for understanding before diving into the nitty-gritty details.
Yes.
Kind of like how architects create a blueprint before they start building a skyscraper.
Perfect analogy. And once you've read those 5 books, he suggests seeking out experts in the field and engaging in conversations with them.
So instead of just passively consuming information, we need to actively seek out those who are already doing what we aspire to do
Right.
and learn from their experience.
Exactly. It's about asking intelligent questions,
Yeah.
probing the boundaries of your understanding, and exploring those areas where your knowledge is incomplete.
That makes me think of that Einstein quote. The important thing is not to stop questioning.
Exactly. And that questioning leads to the next step in Kotler's learning process, exploring the gaps.
Exploring the gaps. You're really making me work for this wisdom today. But that sounds like where the real aha moments happen. Those discoveries that push the boundaries of knowledge and lead to true innovation.
That's exactly it. It's about recognizing that even the greatest experts have blind spots, and there are always areas of knowledge waiting to be uncovered. Imagine being the person who discovers a new species of butterfly or uncovers a hidden connection in history. Thrilling, right?
Talk about making an impact.
Mm.
Okay, so we've embraced our inner stupid, devoured 5 books, picked an expert's brain, and explored the gaps in our knowledge. What's the
Mhm.
final step in this learning odyssey?
The grand finale, sharing your insights with the world.
Okay.
This could mean writing a blog post,
Right.
giving a presentation,
Yeah.
mentoring someone else, or even just having a conversation with a friend where you share what you've learned.
So it's not enough to just hoard knowledge like a dragon guarding its treasure.
Right.
We need to put it out there, make it accessible, and let it spark new ideas and connections.
Precisely.
Mhm.
Kotler argues that sharing our insights is what truly solidifies our learning.
Right.
It's like taking a fuzzy, half-formed idea and bringing it into sharp focus.
It's like when you try to explain a concept to someone else and suddenly your own understanding deepens as you're forced to articulate it clearly.
Exactly. And not only does sharing solidify our own learning, but it also has the potential to inspire and empower others, creating a ripple effect of knowledge and growth.
Okay, I'm convinced. Time to start sharing those awkward learning in progress moments with the world.
Mm-hmm.
But let's switch gears for a second and talk about skill development. I mean, knowledge is power, but without the skills to apply it, it's like having a Ferrari parked in your garage that you don't know how to drive.
Love that analogy. And you're right, mastering new skills is essential for achieving those impossible dreams.
Right.
Thankfully, Kotler draws some brilliant insights from Tim Ferriss,
Oh.
who's basically the master of accelerated learning.
Tim Ferriss, the author of The 4-Hour Workweek,
Yes.
the guy who seems to have mastered everything from cooking to tango dancing to speaking multiple languages. All ears.
That's the one. Ferriss is a big proponent of the 80-20 principle,
Okay.
which basically says that 80% of the results we achieve come from 20% of our efforts.
Okay.
So when it comes to skill development, it's about identifying that crucial 20%, those key skills that will have the biggest impact on our overall performance and focusing our energy there.
Great. So it's about working smarter, not just harder.
Mm.
No more glorifying the grind. Sign me up.
Right. And Ferriss also talks about finding your match quality. This means finding that sweet spot where your skills and interests align perfectly with the work you're doing.
It's like that saying, do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life.
Right.
But it's more than just finding a job you enjoy. It's about finding work that aligns with your core strengths and allows you to use your natural talents to their fullest potential.
You nailed it. And when you have that perfect match quality, not only are you more likely to succeed, but you're also more likely to experience those magical moments of flow, those states of complete absorption where you're performing at your absolute best, and time seems to melt away.
Flow. We can't talk about peak performance without mentioning the F word. It seems like everything we've discussed so far, motivation, grit, learning, skill development, all lead to this elusive state of flow.
They do.
It's like the holy grail of human performance.
And for good reason. Flow is that sweet spot where all these elements come together, where you're fully engaged, completely absorbed in the task at hand,
Right.
and performing at a level that surpasses your normal capabilities.
Right.
Think about a time when you were so engrossed in an activity, maybe writing, painting, playing sports, or even having a really engaging conversation,
Yeah.
that you lost all track of time.
Right.
You were in the zone.
Yeah.
That's the power of flow.
It's like those moments when everything just clicks and you're operating on a whole other level of creativity, focus, and efficiency.
Right.
It's almost like accessing a hidden superpower.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that flow isn't just some subjective experience.
Yeah.
Kotler delves into the neuroscience behind it,
Okay.
showing how flow states trigger a cascade of neurochemicals in our brains. Dopamine,
Wow.
norepinephrine, endorphins, and anandamide. It's like the ultimate brain cocktail.
So not only does it feel amazing, but it's also like a superpower upgrade for our brains. Give me more of that flow state.
Mm-hmm.
But seriously, how do we tap into it more often?
Right.
Is it just a matter of luck, or can we actually cultivate flow in our lives?
The good news is that flow isn't just a random occurrence.
Okay.
There are things we can do to increase our chances of experiencing it.
Okay.
Kotler identifies a number of external and internal triggers that can help us access those flow states.
Okay, spill the secrets.
Yeah.
What are these magical triggers and how do we activate them?
Let's start with the external triggers. Kotler talks about the importance of creating an environment that's conducive to flow.
Okay.
Think about a workspace that's free of distractions, where you have all the tools and resources you need at your fingertips. Or imagine surrounding yourself with inspiring objects, images, or music that sparks your creativity. It's about setting the stage for flow to occur.
So our environment plays a crucial role in shaping our mental state
Yeah.
and influencing our ability to enter those flow states.
Yes.
It's like creating a sanctuary for our minds, a space where we can do our best thinking and creating.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to internal triggers, things get even more interesting.
Okay.
Kotler emphasizes the importance of setting clear goals, receiving immediate feedback on our progress,
Yeah.
and finding that sweet spot between challenge and skill,
Okay.
that feeling of being stretched but not overwhelmed.
So it's about finding that Goldilocks zone
Yeah.
where the task is challenging enough to keep us engaged, but not so difficult that it leaves us feeling discouraged or defeated.
You got it. And here's the really cool part. Kotler also talks about the role of risk and high consequences in triggering flow states. It's like that saying, no pressure, no diamonds.
Right.
When we're facing a challenge that feels meaningful and consequential, our brains kick into high gear and
Yeah.
we're able to access those deep reserves of focus and creativity.
That explains why some of my most productive writing sessions happen right before a deadline, the pressure cooker effect.
Right.
But this raises an interesting question.
Yeah.
If fear and risk can trigger flow,
Mm.
does that mean we need to constantly be putting ourselves in stressful situations to do our best work?
Right.
That sounds a bit unsustainable, if you ask me.
Great question. It's not about seeking out unnecessary stress or chaos. Remember those action and adventure sports athletes we talked about earlier?
Yes.
They intentionally put themselves in risky situations,
Uh.
constantly pushing the limits of what's possible.
Right.
But they're not doing it because they're adrenaline junkies.
Yeah.
They're doing it because those high-stakes situations force them to be present-focused
Right.
and fully engaged in the moment.
Yeah.
And when they're in that state of flow, they're able to perform at their absolute best,
right.
achieving feats that seem almost superhuman.
It's like their brains are wired to perform under pressure, and those moments of risk and uncertainty become the catalyst for unlocking their full potential.
Exactly. And while we don't all need to go out and become extreme athletes,
Right.
we can all learn from their example
Right.
by intentionally seeking out challenges that stretch our abilities,
Right.
even in small ways.
Yeah.
We can train our brains to thrive under pressure and access those flow states more readily.
So it's about finding that balance between comfort and discomfort,
Yes.
pushing ourselves just enough to activate that flow state without completely overwhelming ourselves.
Right.
It's like a mental balancing act.
And the more we practice this balancing act, the better we become at it. It's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
The more we intentionally create the conditions for flow in our lives, the more readily accessible those states of peak performance become.
This is mind-blowing stuff. But I have to ask, how do we actually apply all of these insights in our daily lives?
Right.
It all sounds fantastic in theory, but how do we translate it into action?
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
Kotler provides a practical framework for cultivating flow,
Okay.
sustaining peak performance over the long haul. Yeah.
And ultimately achieving the seemingly impossible. He even outlines a weekly practice schedule that incorporates all the key elements we've discussed. Setting clear goals,
Okay.
training our weaknesses, practicing gratitude and mindfulness,
Yeah.
seeking out challenges,
Right.
and creating those flow-inducing environments.
So it's like a recipe for success.
Yeah.
A blueprint for unlocking our potential and living a life that's not just ordinary, but truly extraordinary.
Exactly.
But even with the best blueprint, there are bound to be bumps along the way.
Sure.
What about those moments of doubt?
Yeah.
Those times when the impossible seems impossible?
Right.
How do we keep going when we feel like throwing in the towel?
Those moments of doubt are inevitable. Everyone experiences them,
Yeah.
even the most accomplished people.
Right. But it's how we respond to those moments that truly matters. That's where the importance of mental resilience and a growth mindset comes into play.
Right.
Remember, setbacks and challenges are not roadblocks.
Yeah.
They're simply detours on the path to success.
So instead of viewing those challenges as failures,
Yes.
we need to reframe them as opportunities for learning and growth.
Exactly.
It's about developing that inner voice that says, okay, that didn't go as planned, but what can I learn from this experience?
Right.
And how can I use it to move forward?
Exactly. And Kotler actually describes the flow cycle,
Okay.
which starts with struggle, that initial phase of frustration and confusion when we're first tackling a new challenge.
Okay.
You know that feeling when you're staring at a blank page, wondering how you'll ever fill it with brilliant prose? Or when you're wrestling with a complex problem
Right.
and the solution seems just out of reach?
Yeah.
That's the struggle phase.
We've all been there. It's like that initial feeling of being overwhelmed, like we're in over our heads
Right.
and we're about to get swallowed by a wave of self-doubt.
And it's tempting to give up at that point, to retreat back to our comfort zones and tell ourselves that maybe this whole achieving the impossible thing wasn't such a good idea after all.
So easy to do that.
It is.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, that struggle is an essential part of the process. It's a sign that we're pushing ourselves,
Okay.
expanding our boundaries,
Yeah.
and moving towards that flow state.
So instead of fearing the struggle, we need to embrace it knowing that it's a stepping stone to something greater. It's like that saying, no pain, no gain. But in this case, it's more like no struggle, no flow.
I love that. No struggle, no flow should be our new mantra.
Right.
And Kotler provides some helpful strategies for navigating that struggle phase, including breaking down tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks, setting clear goals,
Right.
seeking out feedback,
Yeah.
and practicing those mental resilience techniques we discussed earlier.
So it's about finding ways to make the overwhelming feel manageable,
Yes.
the complex feel accessible. It's about breaking down those mental barriers and building a bridge to the other side of the struggle.
Beautifully said. And once we push through that initial struggle,
Yeah.
we often find ourselves in the release phase where things start to click.
Yeah.
And we experience those moments of flow, those
Yeah.
bursts of creativity and insight.
Right.
We're in the zone.
Yeah.
But even in those moments of peak performance, it's important to stay vigilant.
Okay.
Kotler cautions against becoming complacent.
So even when we're riding that wave of flow, we need to be mindful of those flow blockers, those pesky distractions and interruptions that can derail even the most productive session.
Right. Flow is like a delicate flame. It needs the right conditions to thrive.
Right.
So minimizing distractions, staying focused on the task at hand, and being mindful of our energy levels are all crucial for maintaining that flow state.
It's like creating a sacred space for our work, both physically and mentally, where we can fully immerse ourselves in the creative process and let those brilliant ideas flow freely.
Exactly. And once the flow state subsides, we enter the recovery phase,
Okay.
where it's crucial to replenish our mental and physical resources so that we're ready to tackle the next challenge.
Right.
Kotler emphasizes the importance of sleep exercise, nutrition,
Yeah.
and social connection, those essential pillars of well-being that fuel our ability to perform at our best.
It's like that saying, work hard, play hard. We need to make time for both if we want to achieve sustainable long-term success.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance.
Yeah.
So to recap, we've got the struggle phase,
Right.
where we're pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones,
Right.
followed by the release phase,
Mm-hmm.
where we experience those magical moments of flow.
Right.
Then the recovery phase,
Yeah.
where we recharge and prepare for the next cycle. It's a continuous process of growth, expansion, and renewal.
It's like we're surfing the waves of our own potential learning to ride those waves of struggle, flow, and recovery with skill and grace.
What a beautiful image. And Kotler argues that by understanding this cycle,
Yeah.
by intentionally creating the conditions for flow in our lives,
Right.
and by developing those mental and physical habits that support peak performance, we can unlock our full potential and achieve those goals that once seemed impossible.
So what does this all mean? What are the key takeaways for our listeners who are ready to unlock their impossible?
The biggest takeaway is that achieving the seemingly impossible isn't about possessing some rare talent or stumbling upon a magic formula.
Right.
It's about understanding how our brains work
Right.
and then using that knowledge to train ourselves to operate at a higher level.
It's about recognizing that we all have the potential for greatness within us.
We do.
But it's up to us to cultivate that potential,
Yes.
to develop those skills and habits that will allow us to achieve those extraordinary results.
Absolutely.
It's about embracing the pursuit of the impossible itself.
Exactly. It's about setting those audacious goals that ignite our passions, those challenges that force us to grow,
Yes.
and then committing ourselves to a journey of continuous learning, discovery, and self-improvement.
It's about pushing beyond our comfort zones, confronting our fears, and saying yes to those experiences that make us feel truly alive, even if they scare us a little or a lot.
And ultimately, it's about using our unique talents and abilities to make a positive impact on the world,
Yes.
to leave a legacy that extends beyond ourselves, and to inspire others to chase their own impossible dreams.
So as Kotler asks at the end of his book, what impossible goal will you set for yourself today? What's
Yes.
that one thing you've always dreamed of doing?
Right.
That challenge that seems just out of reach.
Right.
That goal you've been too hesitant to even attempt.
Don't be afraid to dream big. Embrace the pursuit of the impossible.
I love that.
Because as we've learned today, with the right mindset, the right tools,
Yeah.
and an unwavering commitment to growth, anything is possible.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep pushing your limits, and keep striving for the impossible.